donation together. What this refers to is, it's the lust or generically the desire that rages against boundaries. Nobody can fulfill every desire that comes up within them. Everybody has boundaries. Your physical boundaries, social boundaries, cultural boundaries, legal boundaries. And the desire that is so wild and uncontrollable that rages against boundaries. Why should I not? Why should I not do this? Who says I can't do this? So it can rage against culture, it can rage against religion. There is an atheistic thinker from France. He said, in Christianity there is the idea of the forbidden fruit. Many of the commandments are thou shalt not. Thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that. So he came up with the idea, it is forbidden to forbid. So he said, why should there be rules? Who told that we should not do certain things? So the idea that now we may say today's culture, mainstream culture has become quite sexually libertarian. People mix with each other, man, woman, whatever. But even in such a libertarian culture, liberal culture, there are boundaries. There are legal boundaries, the basic boundaries of consent. If there is no consent, it's a severe crime. So the point is, boundaries always have to be there. So kama, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, kama is a natural part of just being human. But an essential part of being human is also keeping the kama within boundaries. So the boundaries are basically dharma. Now dharma can mean religion, dharma can mean various things. But the idea of boundaries, we all belong to a larger whole. And dharma basically means harmoniously belonging to the larger whole. Harmonious belonging. Say for example, if you are driving a car on a road, then following the rules of traffic is dharma. So harmonious belonging to a larger whole. When we drive on the road, we are becoming a part of the road transport system. Then we need to belong properly. So dharma is not just a set of religious codes that are given in the past. They are there. But there is an underlying principle that is universal. So when kama makes one rage against boundaries, then that is when the kama starts becoming destructive. So for Ravan, the fact that Sita was married, that was just an insignificant inconvenience. That didn't stop him at all. That is, even in movies where there is sexuality and whatever, generally, say Western culture, if somebody is wearing a ring, then that means they are married. Then we should not be pursuing such a person. That is, even in cultures where premarital sex may be normally accepted, still extramarital sex is frowned upon. So the idea is that always there have to be boundaries. And the demoniac nature is that which rages against and rejects boundaries. So for him, he wanted to pursue Sita. So initially when he came, he wanted to win Sita over. So first he observed her, initially he was acting like a sage. And then suddenly he said, I have to have her. So he started praising Sita's beauty. And when he was praising Sita's beauty, he starts speaking in very explicit terms. So sometimes in Shastra, we might see explicit descriptions. Explicit descriptions of physical beauty. And these can be very jarring. We want to read Shastra to purify our mind. And why is such description given over there? We might normally associate such description with something which is sexually related, pornographic. Why should such things be there? However, there are degrees. There is, if you consider movies, this is using rating and comedy. There is romantic, there is erotic, and there is pornographic. So generally, romantic means what? That when there is a relationship being developed between two people, then the attractive features of both the people are described. And the description of the attractive features is one part of the narrative of developing their entire relationship. So that is a very small part. When something is erotic, then the physical or the sensual aspect becomes much more prominent. But still there is some overall storyline of the meeting, of the relationship, of everything else. But when something is pornographic, the only purpose is to trigger sexual desire. There is no other purpose at all. There is often in such videos there is very little backstory, no actual relationship at all. So what is described in scripture, just because it is explicit, does not mean it is pornographic. It is, Shringar is also a rasa. Generally, Shringar is beautification. Like we have Shringar Arati. We dress the Lord in beautiful ways and then we behold the Lord. So Shringar is also one of the rasas that any kavya, that any Shastric literature is expected to have. Now the Shringar is generally, it is described in places where it serves to advance the storyline. So, what do I mean advance the storyline? Say for example, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 8th canto when the Mohini Murti pastime comes up. So at that time there are certain descriptions of Mohini Murti which are a bit explicit. Now those descriptions in some ways are required to show the dramatic change in behavior from the demon that happens in the demons. You know, there are many people who are beautiful, but why would the demons who had fought so long and struggled so long first work with the demigods whom they opposed, devatas whom they opposed, and then they fought among themselves to try to grab that nectar? Why would they just give it up? So her beauty was so captivating. So to give some indication of that, the description is given. So similarly, when Hanuman is in Lanka, at that time when he is peering, he's trying to find where Sita and he's peering in through the windows to see where Sita is. Ravan is describing the beauty of Sita. Now his purpose is to win her over. And normally when a boy tries to develop a relationship with a girl, he will praise her beauty. Now, depending on culture, which aspects of the beauty are praised, how descriptive the praise is, that may vary from culture to culture. But the idea is, praising the beauty of a girl can soften her heart, can attract her. And then, after that, what does Ravan do? He brags about his wealth. At first he praises her, and normally, when we are speaking something, we are observing others. So, if we are arguing about something and we are seeing, is this person softening, is this person accepting my point? And if that's not happening, then we shift to something else. So, that doesn't shift. And he starts thinking, why is she not being impressed? He has such an ego, he can't imagine that anybody will not be impressed by him. See, somebody who is completely given to wealth and pleasure, Bhogeshwari Prasattana, then they can't imagine anyone who is not given to those things. So, such people think that everybody is interested in those things only. Why is she not impressed by this? They start thinking, maybe, because she still has the feelings for her. So normally if a boy is proposing to a girl, he may praise her beauty, and then he may brag about his own wealth. And then, if she might be interested in some other boy, then he will start trashing that boy. He's only like this. So he starts criticizing Ram. He says, now what can Ram give you? He couldn't even protect his own kingdom. He let himself, like an imbecile, be exiled. He forced you to live a life of poverty. What will you give? What do you get with it? Just abandon him. So Sita's emotions, they change from initially shocked, taken aback, then she's filled with a bit of alarm and horror. But then as Ravan, Sita's emotions, as he makes his advances, initially when it is her beauty being praised, she's shocked. When he starts revealing his identity and talking about his wealth, she's horrified. Because it's Ravan. But when he starts criticizing Ram, at that time, she is angered. She is actually disgusted and angered. Now this is something we didn't expect at all. He expected that she would be impressed and she would come willingly with him. And she says, when he sees that she is not at all his offering, he decides, I have to abduct her. And then he bounces forward and abducts her. So now, this is one storyline which is broadly following the Valmiki Ramayana. Now there is the additional description that is given, that is of the Lakshman Rekha. Now generally, if we hear the Ramayana or the Mahabharata, we may hear many different versions. That this story is there and this additional detail is there, this is there. So it is, in the story there can be many embellishments. Embellishments means like additions that are beautifications. So generally speaking, the Lord's pastimes are immense. They are unlimited. And no one poet or author gets a monopoly on the revelation of those pastimes. So therefore, the Valmiki Ramayana is the Valmiki Adikam. What he is given is the original. But along with that, there are other poets who have also described. And their revelations or their descriptions can also be accepted as long as two things. So embellishments, when can they be positive? When they enhance. When they enhance the details or the emotions. They tell some more new details or they enhance the bhava. But they cannot be accepted when they contradict the details. What is already given in scripture, if they contradict the details or they completely contradict the emotions. So later retellings, now of course we can always talk with the traditional teachers and the commentators to know what is accepted or not, but this is the broad principle. Shastra is not, especially Lord's pastimes, are not like a frozen body of knowledge. So even Rupa Goswami says there is Shastra Praman and there is a Loka Praman. If you go to Vrindavan, there are many stories about Krishna with the Vrajavasis there. Now those stories may not be there in the Shastra. In fact, the very celebrated story of Krishna having a headache and wanting the dust of the feet of the gopis or the feet of his devotees and only the gopis being ready to give the dust. So that is not there in any Shastra, that is not there in the Goswami literature also. At the same time, that illustrates extreme beauty and clarity, the extraordinary selflessness in the love of the gopis. So it is according to the bhava, very much according to the bhava. So it enhances. So basically, there is Shastra Praman and then there is what Rupa Goswami calls as Loka Praman. Loka Praman means that what is generally accepted by not just common people, but by a broad body of people or by respected people, by devoted people, what is appropriate. So knowledge, wisdom is not something which is a fossilized body given at one time and never available afterwards. Krishna says, Vedanishya sarvasya chaham hridivandi Vishnu. Krishna is there in people's heart. Krishna is constantly giving knowledge. That's why there's a living tradition. So, now sometimes of course, some details can go very far away. There is something called Jain Ramayana in India. Because the Ramayana became so popular, other religious traditions also started using that. So Jain Ramayana has more or less the same story as the Ramayana, but the key difference is when Ram goes to the forest, all the sadhus that he are meeting are all Jain sadhus. And they are giving him Jain Siddhanta, Jain teachings. And finally, at the end, when Sita enters into the earth, at that time Ram becomes detached, Ram becomes enlightened, and Ram becomes a Jain. So this is clearly a self-serving story. So either the details or the emotions. Details can be in terms of the story, or it can be turned into the philosophy also. So now the Lakshman Rekha is an embellishment that doesn't go against the original story. Similarly, Shabari's story, that is not given in the Valmiki Ramayana. Shabari Datta Palashan Rama. Now that actually illustrates again the simplicity of devotion. So these stories can be accepted as long as they are embellishments that are positive. Okay, anyway, so the Lakshman Rekha illustrates a different point. So here, what happens is, before Lakshman departs, he creates a mystical circle for the protection of Sita. He says, please don't leave this no matter what happens. And then, when Ravan comes, Ravan initially, when he comes and Sita says, please wait, and Ravan tries to come inside, and he can't come. And then Sita says, please wait, my husband, my brother-in-law will come back soon. And then Ravan is still in the garb of a sage. He says that, I am very hungry, please give me some food right away. He says, no. She says, please wait, they'll just come. Now, see, Ravan knows that Sita must be somewhat virtuous. Otherwise, why would she agree to come with her husband to the forest? So, in this world, generally, if we have vices means if somebody has lust, somebody has anger, the vices can be exploited by others. So, if somebody is greedy, they can be exploited. So, like we discussed yesterday, how Shurpanakha exploited Ravan's lustiness. But the nature of the world is that sometimes even our virtues can be exploited. That virtues we may have a tendency to do good, but people can be so manipulative that they can exploit even our tendency to do good. So, for example, somebody is very charitable. If somebody goes and asks them for help, they'll always give something. But somebody may exploit that, isn't it? Rather than doing something to help themselves, they constantly become dependent on the other person and start exploiting and bankrupting the other person. So, sometimes good attribute like charitability or helpfulness can be exploited. So, in this case, what Ravan, he's come in the garb of a sage, he exploits Sita's service attitude. He says, Dad, I'm hungry, give me food right now. He says, please wait for some time. And he says that, have you not heard about the anger of the sages? If you make a sage angry, you will be cursed. And not only you, but your entire family will be cursed. And Sita's heart starts trembling because of this. And he starts thinking, already there is anxiety about Ram, there's a little bit of a guilt that I sent Ram away into the forest because of the deer that I wanted. So I don't want to cause any further trouble. And thinking in this way, she steps out of the Lakshman Rekha. And when she steps out of the Lakshman Rekha, then Ravan reveals his real form, his real intentions. And seeing her reluctance, he abducts her. So this is especially painful in the world. Now normally, if you consider, there are various kinds of sufferings that can come upon us. There is, at a basic level, there is suffering which is adversity. Adversity means there's some stock market crash and we lose our money. There's a pandemic and we lose our job. That's adversity. Now, then there is atrocity. Atrocity is, do you know the difference between adversity and atrocity? I asked this question in India, and one boy, the college student, he said, this question is an adversity and atrocity for me. So, what is the atrocity? Yes, targeted. I think we discussed this earlier. There's a human agent. Now, adversity can come naturally. So, if somebody tries to hurt us, goes out of our way to hurt us, then that's an atrocity. Now, say, I didn't do anything to you, and still you are hurting me. That's very painful. Now, if we have done something to hurt that person, and then they hurt us back, then we feel bad if they hurt us disproportionately. But the worst is, we do good to someone, and that person does bad to us. Somebody is very poor, and we give them a job, we raise them, we trust them, we employ them in our company, and then they betray us and they cheat us. Now that doesn't just shake our faith in that person. It does. It can shake our faith in human nature itself. So it can be very damaging. So anyway, this happens. And Sita, she has a virtue. She has a service attitude. She respects sages and wants to serve sages. But that very thing is exploited. That very thing is exploited. So, it's when we are learning, when we are interacting with people, there are two extremes we could go to. There's trust in relationships. There could be too much trust. Then we tend to become naive. If there is too little trust, then we become cynical. Cynical means anybody does anything good to us, we always ascribe the darkest, the most negative motives toward them. So we don't want to be naive. If we are naive, what will happen is we will be cheated, we will be exploited. If we are naive, our heart will be hurt. It may even be broken. But if we are cynical, our heart will become totally cold. We will become completely incapable of love and trust and relationships. So, on one side, we want to be caring. But we also need to be careful. If there's a pandemic and then we want to help someone, but if we don't have a mask, if that person does not have a mask, in trying to help them, we might get into trouble. So, even when we are trying to do good, good intentions are no substitute for good intelligence. Good intentions are important, no doubt, but good intentions are not a substitute for good intelligence. So good intelligence is where if we really want to do good in the world, we certainly need to have good intentions, but we also need to have good intelligence. Then, combined, we can have good results. So sometimes we want to help, in the devotee community, sometimes we want to be of service. And service attitude is important. But sometimes, this devotee tells us to do this, that devotee tells us to do that devotee tells us to do that. And then we start feeling so overwhelmed. And we do everything for everyone, and then afterwards, when we need help, nobody seems to be there for us. Then we will feel betrayed, we will feel abandoned. So, yes, we want to be of service. At the same time, we all have our human limitations. We all have multiple dharmas. We have our own sadhana apart from our seva. We all have our family responsibilities. We have our jobs. So sometimes we need to say no. Of course, we have to be careful. We don't want to displease and hurt devotees. But at the same time, even a good thing can become a bad if it is done indiscriminately or excessively. So there are boundaries required not only for our vices, but also for our virtues. So Ravan exploits Sita's respect and service attitude toward the sages. And then he abducts her. Now, as soon as Sita realizes Ravan, she tries to run away. But Ravan is just too fast, too strong. He catches her and drags her. And then, now Ravan has not brought his Pushpak Viman over here. He wants to be a little discreet over here. He wants to sneak in and come in. So he's brought his ordinary chariot. He summons his chariot and then he gets on the chariot. Now as Sita is abducted, it's like a complete chill falls over the entire forest. It's as if the whole of nature is horrified at what calamity has befallen. And yet, because Ravan is such a scarily powerful demon, nobody is there to intervene. Nobody can stop him. And as Ravan is moving on, is racing away, Sita sees someone along the way. Who is that? Jatayu. She sees Jatayu atop a tree. Is resting over there. Now Sita, although she is a woman, she is a Kshatriya. She is a Kshatriya lady. And she immediately assesses the power of different warriors. She recognizes that Jatayu will not be able to fight with Ravan. She says, "Oh Jatayu, please help me." He says, "Tell Ram that I have been abducted by Sita. Don't try to fight with Ravan." Jatayu sees Ravan going by and he hears what Sita is saying, and immediately he flies up and he starts going along with the chariot. And Jatayu tries to chastise Ravan. He says, "You call yourself a hero." Now he knows straightforward, a good instruction is not going to help him. So he tries to trigger his Kshatriya pride. He says, "You call yourself a hero? But what kind of coward are you? If you want Sita, challenge Ram. You are just being an utter coward abducting Sita like this. Wait till Ram comes back and fight with her." Ravan, he has his pride, but here his lust is very strong. And he, thinking my whole conspiracy has worked, now I am going to go. He neglects Jatayu. And then when Jatayu sees that Ravan is just not listening to him, he decides that I have to fight with him. Now, Mrs. Sita has told him, don't fight. Why does he do that? It is that, although he's a vulture, among birds, vultures are actually quite fierce birds. Eagles or hawks are dangerous birds. But vultures are also no small word. Vultures are also powerful. So he has a bit of a Kshatriya spirit. And he says, he had a friendship with Dashrath. So Sita is like a daughter for him. He says, I cannot just stand by while she is being abducted. I will not be able to live with myself if I just let her pass by. So generally, when we face a difficult situation, that when we face a very difficult situation where fighting in that situation may or may not be feasible for us. So to fight or not, there are broadly two factors to decide. There is our position and our disposition. So our position means if there is a riot going on and somebody is the police can't run away from there. That is your position, that is your role. But there is a disposition also. No, some policemen is fine with their job. But if a police person is off duty, they are going on a vacation, and there they see somebody being robbed. If they have that disposition, they want to protect over their house. So generally, fighting or not fighting, that is determined both by our social role as well as our mental disposition. So Jatayu just can't live with it, he has to fight. Now when he fights, because of his affection and care for Sita, he fights fiercely. He fights like never before. Ravan thinks this is just a noisy irritation. He will just get tired and he'll go. Then Jatayu will fall back. But he doesn't. When Jatayu attacks also, he just treats him like a pesky inconvenience and tries to dodge him. He doesn't want to even spend time fighting with him. But Jatayu starts attacking him. And Jatayu catches him from behind. And first catches him by the hair. And just drags him around. For Ravan, this is humiliating. A mere bird is just dragging him around. He turns around and tries to attack him, the dodges him. Then Jatayu fights and actually rips off his arms. It's a spectacular feat. But Ravan has mystical powers. Not only can his head regenerate back, even his arms can regenerate back. And Jatayu, whatever he does, it doesn't seem to be having any effect. And Jatayu keeps attacking. Ravan is also Kshatriya. He realizes Jatayu is far more formidable than what I thought. And then Ravan decides to fight dirty. Fight dirty means what? Like fight fair means you fight with the other person on the same terms. Like say fight dirty means say if one player in a cricket match, one player is playing very well, then what do? You try to disturb the rhythm of that player. You suddenly create some break. Maybe I'm injured, so get somebody else to come on there. Delay the flow. Try to disrupt the flow. So what he does is, he sees that Jatayu is old. Jatayu will get tired soon. So what he does is, now he's flying and Jatayu swoops down upon him. When he swoops down, he just dodges. He just dodges and lets Jatayu go. And then again Jatayu has to come back. And when Jatayu sees that this is again happening, he decides that I will deal with him. He attacks his chariot and his charioteer. He smashes the chariot. And Ravan falls back, falls to the ground. Ravan comes down to the ground. And this itself is a significant feat. Just destroy his chariot. But unfortunately for Jatayu, that which seems to be a victory actually sows the seed of his defeat. Because while Ravan was in the sky, he could just come straight to him. But now, to attack Ravan on the ground, Jatayu has to come from above to the ground and then again fly away. And each time he comes down forcefully, tries to attack Ravan, and Ravan dodges. And then Jatayu fly away. Now, all this starts exhausting him more. Each time going up, and Ravan is observing. Each time Jatayu is going up, he is becoming slower. He's becoming slower, and eventually, when Jatayu just charges up to Ravan, and Ravan dodges him. And as Jatayu is moving, just because he becomes a little slower, Ravan's lunges forward and lops off his wing. Jatayu tries to move forward, just cannot. Then Ravan comes forward and lops off the other wing also. And Jatayu collapses to the ground. Now Ravan is not even interested in killing Jatayu. He thinks, let him suffer. Let it die at his own pace. He turns towards, grabs Sita. Sita tries to run away, but he grabs her and then he goes on. Now, at this point, Jatayu's story itself can go much longer. But the point is that Jatayu's actions can sometimes seem in vain. Now, what is the point of it all? He fought and he lost. He fought for the Lord. So the scriptures, they do describe the Lord's triumph. But just because the Lord is triumphant doesn't mean that every endeavor of a devotee will also be triumphant. In this world, setbacks and failures occur. So in the Mahabharata, Abhimanyu is killed. In the Ramayana, Jatayu is killed. There are cases of, even on the good side, there are casualties. But Jatayu's endeavor does not go in vain. In two ways it is described. Actually, three ways you can say. First way is that See, in the Vedic times, there were many rituals that were done. Rituals, yajnas, and all these things. So we often associate these with religion. And that is true, but actually in those times, these are more like technology. Why? Because yajnas would be done by which power could be acquired. So even demons would do yajnas, they could get powers. So when Ravan fought with Ravan also had his brahmanas. And those brahmanas were doing yajnas so that Ravan would win over Ravan. So his brahmanas were called yatutanas. So basically by doing various rituals, you gain access to higher powers. Now what we use those higher powers for, that depends on the individual. It's like technology. Technology is value neutral. Technology can be used by the police and the military to defend people. It can be used by terrorists to kill people. So yajnas are in that sense like technology. Just because somebody is doing yajna doesn't mean that person is dharmic. Why are they doing it is important. That's why Krishna in the Gita also talks about yajna, dana, tapa being in 3 modes. So anyway, the point I'm making is that Ravan also had an astrologer. And Ravan had consulted an astrologer before going about abducting Sita. It's such a utterly heinous, inauspicious activity. He said, what is the muhurta in which I can do this right? There's no time to do something right like this. It was so heinously wrong. But because of his fight with Jatayu, Ravan gets delayed in abducting Sita. And later on, when Jatayu meets Ram, he says that he's also aware of astrology. He says, anyone or anything that is lost during this time will be regained. So in one sense, Jatayu's sacrifice does not go in vain. The second is, Jatayu remembers what Sita had told him. Please tell Ram. So he determinedly holds on to his life till Ram comes over there. And he has tried to do some extra service. He's tried to protect Sita from being abducted. Just because he couldn't do the extra service does not mean that he won't do the expected service, the requested service. So he holds on his life, and in that sense, he is successful. He does play a key part in helping Ram eventually find Sita. And the third is that Jatayu eventually departs in the lap of Lord Ram. Lord Ram does his last rite. Lord Ram gives him the status of being like his father. In fact, in some ways more than his father. Because Lord Ram is not personally present to perform the last rites of Dashrath Maharaj. He's in exile. So, while Jatayu's failure was there was Jatayu's success also. It's a slightly nuanced success. It was, at one level, the delay from an astrological perspective. Then there was the requested service. He informed Ram, as Sita had asked him. And then lastly, it was a glorious departure. Everybody has to die sooner or later in this world. But to die in the presence of Lord Ram, being embraced, being expressed gratitude to by Lord Ram, and having last rite being performed by Lord Ram, that is supremely auspicious. So Jatayu does play his part over there. Now after this, Ram and Lakshman come back. They reach the clearing, and when they reach the clearing, they see Sita is not there anywhere. They look around, they just cannot find Sita anywhere at all. They start searching. They see some signs of a little bit of a scuffle over there. They can make out this one powerful being over here. Now, what might be the demon's intention? As the demon devoured her, there's no sign of any blood anywhere. So, they say, what has happened over there? And as they start searching, can't find anywhere at all, any sign of Sita. So at that time, Ram's anxiety grows into anger. And when he becomes angry, he starts taking out his celestial weapons. And he looks at the sky and calls out, He looks at the trees, he looks at the sky, he looks at nature, he looks at Devta. He says, tell me where Sita has been taken. If you do not tell me, I will destroy the universe right now. And his reach seems to cause the whole universe to tremble. And generally in the Ramayana, it is Lakshman who is known to be short-tempered. It is Lakshman who is short-tempered and Ram calms him down. Initially when Ram is exiled, Lakshman gets angry. Then when Bharat comes with an entire army, Lakshman becomes angry. Each time Ram calms him down. But at this point, there is a role reversal. There is a role reversal, Ram becomes angry. And at that time, it is Lakshman. Oh my brother, he says, I understand your pain. But I will speak some words that I have heard from you before. He says, if under duress, under distress, if you give in to anger, what example will you set for the world? How will people be able to declare distress without causing destruction? Let us try to find Sita. Let us search for her. And if we can't find her, then you can vent your anger. But first, let us do our part. And Lakshman hears this. So Ram hears this. He says, yes, Lakshman, you are right. Yes, so although Lord Ram is God, Lord Ram is playing the role of an ideal human being. And one of the roles that he plays over here is that he also takes instruction. And not just taking instruction from sages is very easy, because they are supposed to be elderly and more in a social position exalted. But taking some good advice from somebody who is junior to us, that is not easy. Ram could even say, my anger is justified. He's been so virtuous throughout. And even when he went to find Sita, it was out of a virtuous desire to just give her some pleasure. And when something terrible has happened like this, so his anger could very well be justified. See, even when we have a right to be angry, even when we have a right to be angry, that does not necessarily mean we are right to be angry. That person has done something which is outrageous, which is terrible. And I have a right to be angry. But still, even then, if we just give in to anger, we may end up making things worse. So it requires a deep level of humility. Humility to actually not give in to anger. And humility especially to be pacified by the words of a junior. So sometimes our ego comes in the way. And this Ram's behavior can be contrasted later with Ravan's behavior. When Vibhishan tries to give him some good advice, what does Ravan do? Ravan rejects Vibhishan. Ravan humiliates Vibhishan. Ram does not give in to anger over there. So for all of us also. Now Lakshman is respectful in the way he gives some good advice. But it's important that we all be ready, be open. One time when Prabhupada was in Europe, there was supposed to be fire sacrifice supposed to be done, and for the Yagdiksha Yagya, and everything was messed up. The flowers were not there, the fruits were not there, the ghee was not there. And Prabhupada got upset. And Prabhupada got angry and Prabhupada started chastising the devotees. And at that time, one hippie, he had come to watch the ceremony. And he came to Prabhupada and he said, Swamiji, don't get angry, just chant Hare Krishna. And Prabhupada looked at him initially. Prabhupada was angry, Prabhupada glared at him. And all the devotees painted bread, what is going to happen? And Prabhupada just Vikram's me back, I started chanting and walked away from there. So, Prabhupada's anger was also transcendental. It was concerned that the service to Krishna and Guru should be done properly. But still, Prabhupada calmed himself down. So, it shows character to be able to take good advice, even from sometimes a person who is a junior. So, here we will see Jatayu did what he could, Ram was trying to do what he could, Lakshman did what he could. I'll conclude with the last part now. What did Sita do? At one level, she was helpless. Now, see, when something terrible happens, there is something like a mental fog that can come up. We just can, when some adversity comes, people can just become so disturbed mentally that they don't even know what is happening. But a sign of composure, if you are really responsible, then we keep our head together. Sometimes there is this whole feminist idea that women are shown in a lower light in the scriptures. But it is not like that. If you see the Mahabharata, Draupadi is the only person who actually remembers dharma in that adharmika assembly. And she tries to remind everyone of her dharma. She doesn't panic, she doesn't collapse. She doesn't just cry and start crumbling. She's crying, but she's still maintaining her dharma. And Krishna appreciates her for that. They said that in that dishonorable assembly, everybody who was present, they emerged stained by dishonor. And although all of it was done to dishonor you, Draupadi, you emerged as the most honorable person through it. So Sita also, just like Draupadi is a strong character, Sita is in her own way a strong character. She has a different personality. Sita doesn't just panic and give into fear and collapse. She's being abducted. She's watching. She's calling out for help. But there's just no one who can help. So her throat is becoming hoarse. She stops. And then as they're passing by the Gandhamadhan Parvat, the Pampa Sarovar in that area, then she's looking around, is there anyone to help? And she sees some strange looking beings. They look somewhat like monkeys, they look somewhat like humans. The word Vanara, there is a imaginative etymology for that. Vanara, wise or, hey, aren't these humans? They look so much like humans, so Vanara. So she sees them and she calls out, help! And then they look up and she also, Kshatriya, she says their faces look very kind. Now Ravana is going very fast and way up. They can't help her. But while Ravana is taking her along, Sita immediately, she takes out some of her jewels. She rips off a part of her cloth and she ties those jewels in the cloth. And all this happens within moments. Ravana is not waiting. We want to see, let us see. Now Ravana is just racing along. But she has that presence of mind at that time. And she drops the jewels. And all of them are these Vanaras. Who are there? There's Sugriva, there's Hanuman, they're watching. They go and collect those jewels. And later on when Ram comes, at that time, Ram gets those children. Ram is so moved to see them. Know that Sita is alive and that Sita is confident, hopeful and confident that she will be rescued. So sometimes life may put us in very constrained situations where there may seem to be very little in our power. But just because what is in our control is very little does not mean that there is nothing in our power. So within whatever little was in Sita's power, she did what she could. She left a clue for Ram to find her. So this is actually for all of us, we need to be resourceful. One of the characteristics of Kshatriya is Dakshan. Dakshan is expertise, it can also be resourcefulness. Now resourceful, what does it mean? Literally it means full of resources. But that's not the only meaning. It also means one who can fully use whatever resources are available. one who can fully use whatever resources are available. If something very small is available for us, we use that very small thing. Rather than worrying or resenting, oh, this is not in my control, that is not in my control, this is happening, that is happening. Okay, this is happening. What can we do within what is happening? Okay, what is in my control? So generally, when suddenly things start going out of our control, our tendency is to get angry or panic. Why is this happening? I can't do this also, I can't do this also, I can't do this also. But okay, what can I do in this situation? So we need to be resourceful. When Srila Prabhupada in America, he went to Butler, then he came to New York, then he went to the Lower East Side, and there he was staying at a place where another hippie was staying. That was David Allen. And this person seemed to be very receptive. And Prabhupada wrote a letter to Sunti Moraji, his Indian sponsor, saying that he may well become the first American Vaishnava. He may even take initiation. Prabhupada had such great hopes in him. And suddenly, one day, this person just had a relapse with drugs, and he went mad. And he just, in that drug-induced craze, he came to attack Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was all alone in that house, nobody was there, and when people go high on drugs, they have no awareness of what they're doing. So there are 3 long, curved stairs. Prabhupada just rushed down the stairs. And Prabhupada came out. And he was on the streets. The counterculture, especially the Lower East Side, was a terrible place to be in. In America, there are a few countries where people have guns. They have legal right to have guns. So there are people who are sharpshooters, they just go and shoot anyone. Prabhupada was all alone on the streets. There were hippies lying on the streets, on the footsteps. They were unconscious, they were stoned. Some of them had passed out and they even died. So they could tell Prabhupada just as homeless as any of those. Above, on the roofs of this houses, there were crows who were moving around. Prabhupada just had nowhere to go. And at that time, Prabhupada had a lot of setbacks. But this was probably the most painful. The person who was supposed to become a devotee, that person is attacked. Prabhupada could have said, what is the use of all this? These people, there is no hope for them. They are never going to take up. I tried. Prabhupada had gone to America on a 2-month visa. And he kept extending the 2-month visa again. And the cargo ships from India regularly would go by. Prabhupada had a standing invitation. Whenever you want to come back, you can come back. Prabhupada could have thought, let me just leave. This is too much. I can't do this anymore. But Prabhupada, he thought, he just went to a nearby phone booth. There were no mobiles over there. And he called one of the persons who used to regularly come for the programs. This was not any serious person. None of the people at that time had shown any substantial commitment. But Prabhupada told them what had happened. And that person, initially, the person was not ready to believe it. David was not a very imposing figure. He says, David is not a dangerous person. Prabhupada said, no, he's mad with drugs. He doesn't know what he's doing. And he said, I'll come back with you, we'll take you back to that place. And Prabhupada said, I cannot stay there. Then they arranged for Prabhupada to go to some other place at one of their houses. Then they got a flat for Prabhupada. And that's when they got to 26nd Avenue. And then that is where Prabhupada started getting some of his early disciples, people who became serious. So at that point, when Prabhupada had no followers, Prabhupada had no place to stay, Prabhupada had no prospects of moving forward in his outreach. He could have just given up. It's not working. But being resourceful means that we don't resent, oh, I don't have this and I don't have this, I don't have this. Okay, whatever resource I have, let me use it. Let me use it. So being resourceful is actually the opposite of being resentful. Resentful means we focus on what I don't have. And we get angry. Why don't I have this? Why was this taken away from me? But what do I have and what can I do with what I have? That is being resourceful. And although Sita's abduction was a terrible, terrible incident, we'll see how everyone played their parts in trying to make the best of a bad situation. And through it all, eventually, great good comes for the world. The whole universe becomes rid of the terrible demon Ravana. But during that process, it is a traumatic situation. And through these characters, we learn how, when adversity, when atrocity, when unfair pain comes upon us, how we can try to make the best of a bad situation. Throughout Sita's abduction, there is no miraculous intervention by herself. She is protected. Things are not miraculous, things are tragic. But even within that tragedy, everybody is doing the best that they can. And eventually, through that tragedy, something good does emerge. Not just good, something great and glorious does emerge. So I'll summarize what we discussed today. We discussed broadly 4 distinct points. So first was, we discussed how Ravan exploited Sita's virtue and how we need to be regulated, even in we need to have boundaries to protect ourselves from our vices and even from our virtues. Too much of anything can be bad and it can be very heartbreaking. So we discussed, we avoid being too naive and we avoid being cynical. So in between is, we are caring plus careful. We want to care for others, we also need to be cautious, take small steps if we are trusting someone. Then the second we discussed was Jatayu's martyrdom. Jatayu fought heroically and it may seem it was in vain. But although it might seem failure, there was success. Success in terms of delay, success in terms of the delay in the abduction of Sita, the delivery of the information, and success in terms of his departure. He actually departed gloriously. So basically, sometimes success may not come in the terms that we expect, but success will still come. And then we talk about Ram's anger. That Lord Ram demonstrates that even the noblest of people may sometimes get overwhelmed by situations, and they may respond in ways that may not be proper. So even when we have a right to be angry, what happened to Ram was terrible, but that does not necessarily mean we are right to be angry. So even the best of us we often need support and counsel from others. And those others can even be our juniors. So Lord Ram's gracefulness, that is seen in his being ready to accept wisdom even from his juniors. And then lastly, we talked about Sita's resourcefulness. That even when something terrible has happened, she did not just become panicky, become anxious, start crying and lose her bearings. She did what she could. That she dropped her jewels, as clues for Lord Ram. So for all of us, it's easy to feel resentful when bad things are happening to us. But we try to do what we can. So resourceful is the way to avoid being resentful. So I just conclude the last one, when adversity comes upon us, the difference between resourceful and being resentful is, if we are resentful, then we are constantly asking, is God there for me? Why is God not doing anything? Why is God not intervening? But instead, we can ask the question, am I there for God? Am I there for God means that now I am put in the situation, what does God want me to do in this situation? What can I do constructively in this situation? Prabhupada could have asked, where is Krishna when this David is attacking me? Is God there for me? Does Krishna even care? Does Krishna want this preaching to happen? But the focus was on, am I there for all? Okay. I don't know what Krishna wants to do, but whatever Krishna wants me to do I have the readiness, the receptivity, the service attitude? If we have that, then Krishna can use us in extraordinary ways. And that is what will be revealed in the Ramayana as we move forward. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.